Well, welcome everybody. I'm a bit surprised to be sitting here today because I thought I was giving a talk tomorrow. So, fortunately, I prepared something earlier. I wanted to just start off by carrying on where I finished at the beginning of the first meeting we had on Sunday night, was it? It's Tuesday already, isn't it? It's strange, Sesshin's strange. It seems like a real metaphor for life. It goes very slowly and then suddenly whoosh, it's over. The minutes go slowly and the days go fast. I don't know how that works, but does everybody feel like that? It's already Tuesday. Tomorrow we'll be halfway through. So I just wanted to talk about what happens when we arrive on retreat, and this may not resonate for some of you. You know, the thing when you give a Dharma talk is that it's always works for some folk, and for other folk it kind of doesn't happen, I think, and they disagree with it. But when you give a talk, obviously you can only give one perspective, so apologies if what I have to say doesn't resonate for you, but hopefully it will for some folk. So my just to be here is required for all of us a lot of investment of time and energy, money, separation from jobs, from family, and I think I'm right in saying that most of us arrive with the expectation that we'll find some benefit, some peace, some reduced stress, some answers, some increased creativity, some solution to life problems. Is that right? Is that the expectation that we have? And often when we arrive, what we find is the opposite. It's a new place, it's stressful, there's lots of old routines, there's no support system, you know, like reading, all the displacement activities that we get up to. The sitting is hard. You may have a job you don't like, your brain's chattering and complaining, and you think to yourself, this is just the same as home. Why did I come? I may as well be at home. And what happens, my understanding of what happens is it's the same as the rest of life. You know, there's a gap between our expectations of what we'll find and what actually happens. And it's this gap in our lives, and on Sesshin, I guess, as well, the lack of ease, or at the worst, suffering arises. Which is, I think probably for most of us, certainly sometimes in our lives, we find ourselves in a place and we wonder, how did that happen? This isn't what I planned. This isn't the life that I had in mind. How come I'm in this particular fold? This isn't what I was planning to direct. And we're kind of bewildered that we find ourselves in this place and wonder why. I don't have any answer to that, by the way. I don't know what the solution is to that. I don't know whether what arises for us is the right thing, and you know, obviously the only way we can embrace it is to see it as something that we can learn from, rather than looking at it as something that's wrong, something that we can benefit from. Except that's a personal thing. It's not. It upsets me, or me personally anyway, when you know you're having a tough time and somebody says, "Oh, it's good for you," or "This is good for your practice." It's the last thing you want to know when you're having a tough time, that this is good for your practice. You just want to be empathized with, you know. So if life's problems are the opportunity to grow and develop, at least apply that only to yourself, I would suggest. When other people are having a tough time, at least be sympathetic with them, because in the midst of it doesn't feel like that, you know. Okay, so Dogen says this about Sesshin. It's the opportunity to take our minds away from expectation and plant it in what is happening now. We are sitting to practice this letting go. we're sitting to practice letting go. And Zazen allows us the space for that. And it also allows space for the things that it would be a good idea to let go of to come up. You know, our conditioning, our resistance to the aches and pains of sitting, which themselves trigger emotional responses, which are memories and tensions, which all come up on the cushion. And the reason to be here, the reason that we arbitrarily choose, as I understand it, to voluntarily restrict ourselves, which is what we're doing, which is what Roshi often talks about, voluntary restriction. We in advance set up a situation where we can't escape from these things. Where are we going to go? We can't withdraw, we can't hide. We're here, we've chosen to be here for a week and we're on the mat. So in that sense, we've chosen this, and it would be silly really to lose the opportunity to be there. So and one final word on this is that sometimes what happens when these things arise, or our conditioning, our upsets, or our joys as well, but on the negative side is that we look outside and we find that it's either somebody or something else which is the cause of our issue. So, if somebody's walking too slow in kinhin, or somebody's wriggling on the cushion, or somebody's coughing too much, it's their fault. It's not their fault. We're all responsible for ourselves on Sesshin. And this practice is ultimately about embracing each moment and opening to it without judgment. Can we embrace each moment and open to it without judgment? That's really our challenge, I think, for the week. And I also wanted to say something about the incremental benefits of practice, because a lot of us, it's very nice to see some new folk here, and folk relatively new to the practice, and a lot of us have been training for a long time now. And what I want to say is that it's a really good idea to continue steadily in your practice, and don't keep throwing cold water into the pot just as it's about to boil because it's getting too much for you. And you know what I mean about throwing water in the pot and taking it off to boil. It's a bit like perhaps we feel we're not fit enough and we decide to get fit, and then we get really fit, and then we think, oh, I'm fit now, I think I can stop that, I don't need to train anymore, I'll remain fit. But it doesn't happen. You become unfit quite quickly, and it's the same with practice. If you keep breaking it, if you keep stopping this incremental commitment to it, then what happens is that you do get back to square one, and issues do arise in your life, and you think, oh, I better start practicing again. So you may as well just carry on. And the other reason I would suggest that you really maintain your practice is that don't make the mistake of thinking that it's always going to be available, because it isn't. Having an opportunity to, like here, isn't guaranteed. We get older, we lose our ability to sit, things can happen in our lives, we may have to move. In a flash, your life can change and you can't practice. So again, I'd recommend, while you can, to nurture the practice and to nurture yourself in it. And as well, as a rider to that, because I recently met somebody who, an elderly person that I really liked, that had been practicing all their lives and they still hadn't found resolution. And they were approaching death and really wanted to be settled, And my only response to that was that actually it's okay not to be okay. It is okay to not be okay. It is okay to still struggle. It is okay to not necessarily have found peace. that's part of the human condition. It doesn't in any way mitigate against your validity as a human being or the worth of the practice. There's no golden rule out there saying that we will find peace or that life will be easy. It remains a struggle, and that's okay as well. So even if you can't kind of stand by the things I'm saying, that's okay. You don't need to feel bad about it. It's just the way it is for you at this time. Nevertheless, let me encourage you to carry on. So I've been interested in the last couple of months in the paradoxes of practice. And there are lots of paradoxes in this practice. And one of them, which I've been subject to myself, which is going to lead me on to what I really wanted to talk about today, is the paradox of spiritual practice as a journey. And the paradox is that thinking of spiritual practice as a journey may work against its intended purpose. Because, in fact, being here now, being right here now in your life, doesn't need any preparation. So, why do we need the journey? And one of the reasons that I, for myself, see that I needed the journey was that this kind of limited ego self values the idea of work, of depending on going somewhere, of improvement, of validation, and if we think it's not happening, then we can intensify our journey, we can look elsewhere, we can find a different teacher, a different tradition, different partner. We find all kinds of ways to see and think that we need to be on a journey to be present. But if we forget about those hopes and ambitions and the idea of a spiritual kind of moving forward, then we have the opportunity to be present to our lives in the moment. And it's only when we're in the moment that we are faced, if you like, or confronted with, or are able to look at all our conditioned tendencies. And it's these conditioned tendencies that unconsciously drive our lives, as I understand. And for all of us, they're all present. And unless we become aware of them, we'll blindly act out of them on an ongoing basis repetitively. I don't know whether that resonates for everybody, but unless we really see, unless we really look at our pre-existing conditions, our habitual tendencies, and make a high priority of really seeing them, then we're just going to carry on repeating the same pattern. And the paradox within that is that if we fight or struggle or take a kind of warrior view of our conditioning and tendencies and are determined to rule them out or to deal with them, that itself is counterproductive. The self loves that, it thinks it's going to get somewhere. It's this idea of my idea of myself is a really hardened habit. So the kind of view I've come to for myself is that I have to let go of that idea of being a warrior on the path, and actually just to surrender to my life as it is right now, which is hard, which is not easy. I don't think for any of us it's easy. When it's going okay, it's fine, but when it's not going okay, we struggle with it. Okay, my second paradox is, I've called it the paradox of being alive. And and how do any of us live with the paradox that my sense of being me and my attachment to this me, and to the fullness of being me, how do I bring that together with the realization and understanding of the emptiness or delusion of a personal self? How do we live with the urge to find meaning within meaninglessness? And how do we live with the concepts of time and space and the idea of an unborn, undying timelessness of our essential nature? How do we live with those two things? And are they two things? I mean, they're just words finally. There's only one thing, which is your life, but we talk about these two things as a way, I guess, of allowing us to talk about it, of having a context in which to look at the relative and the absolute, these terrible words that we use. So each side of that paradox represents half of our reality. That's a way we can talk about it. And yet most of us are, whether we choose it or not, captured by the deluded dualistic side of ourselves. We're entertained by the language and concepts and ideas of a separate valid self, isolated from other selves. I mean, it is bewitching, that idea. But spiritual practice is about bringing balance to this paradox of a personal me and the selfishness that brings. Understandably, sometimes, it's perfectly okay to be selfish, we have to be. And this unborn, undying, selfless self that we can kind of that we can experience, that we can know is there. And I think all of us know that when we open the door to experiencing that side of our life, it's very reluctant to be closed again. Once we get in the train of practice, it's very difficult to get off. So, how do we live a life? Another paradox that from one perspective has a point, and from another perspective is pointless. When the old small self hears that it might be pointless, it gets really upset and frightened and fretful. What's this all about? Why are we here? There's no point. But there is another side in which, from one perspective, it's just being present, really. There isn't any particular point. So, what is the meeting place of these two different realities? That is not in either domain, but transcends both. And in fact, neither domain exists independently of the other. We give them names and talk about them, but separately to help us understand. But in fact, there's only one reality. And what is that reality? And where is it right now? I could bang the floor, or punch myself in the chest, or whatever. But I want to emphasize in that to be stuck on either side of this paradox is equally stuck. To have an opening experience of whatever we want to talk about, is a realization, without any action in your life, you're just as stuck as the person who's stuck in delusion. So, don't be beguiled into thinking that everything will be hunky-dory if you have a realization. It has to be manifested in your life to have any meaning. Well, for the rest of us it has to be. I mean, you might be hunky-dory in there, but it's not helping anyone else out. So this brings me to a wonderful verse. I don't know. Perhaps other people know how it's Tagore. Tagore. It's a hard G. An Indian poet called Tagore. Is that? It's not Tagore. Tagore. Okay. So Tagore's written a verse which I've called the union of form and emptiness. I've called it that. He didn't call it that. He was much wiser than I am. And this is his verse. See what you make of it. The infinite sky is motionless overhead, and the restless water is boisterous. On the seashore of endless worlds, the children meet with shouts and dances. So read that to you again. The infinite sky is motionless overhead, and the restless water is boisterous. On the seashore of endless worlds, the children meet with shouts and dances. So my understanding of this verse is it's a poetic description of this basic Buddhist idea of the union of form and emptiness, samsara and nirvana, all the words that we give to what in fact is just one thing. So line 1, given what I've been talking about, what do you think he's referring to in the infinite sky is motionless overhead? There's a challenge for you. What's he talking about? The infinite sky is motionless overhead.
Shunyata.
Pardon?
Shunyata.
Shunyata's one. There's a any other takers for shunyata?
The absolute.
The absolute, okay. The infinite sky is motionless overhead.
Emptiness.
Did I hear a little
Emptiness.
emptiness? Okay, good. Let's go emptiness, shunyata. What was the third?
The absolute.
Pardon?
Someone said the absolute.
Oh, absolute emptiness, shunyata. Yeah. Okay.
What about the infinite sky?
The infinite.
Just the infinite sky.
The infinite sky. What about it?
Well, he's talking about the infinite sky, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and you're saying the infinite sky.
Any of that.
That's pretty good. Yeah, the infinite. That's a nice. It is. Yeah. I mean, it is wonderful. Yeah. You know, you're all right. This is a part I didn't realise till I read the text, but this is an often used image, and it describes non-discriminating awareness. And what do you think non-discriminating awareness means? There's a question for. What is non-discriminating awareness?
The infinite sky is motionless.
The infinite sky is motionless, yeah. Traditionally, it means the lack of an absolute reality in persons or things. You know, there's no absolute ground out of which everything arises. Non-discriminating awareness. So, what about then? And the restless water is boisterous.
That's everything else.
Everything else? Being you? Yeah.
Humanity, perhaps.
Humanity, yeah.
All the
Good. All that bubbling stuff that's going on. Egos and troublemaking, boisterous waters, yeah. And the restless water is boisterous.
Just as it is.
Pardon?
Just as it is.
Just as it is? Yeah, it is like that, isn't it? It does feel boisterous and restless and... yeah. I've written the world of the senses and the busy inner world of our discursive, discriminative thinking. The restless water is boisterous. How many feel that their restless water is boisterous? Or are you at peace? So I think probably on a daily basis, these two aspects of reality feel quite separate. But if perhaps at the end of the Sesshin you can let me know whether this applies to you. Line 3. On the seashore of the endless worlds. So he says, the infinite sky is motionless overhead and the restless water is boisterous. On the seashore of endless worlds. What's the seashore of endless worlds? Now. And it's now because what meets on the seashore of the endless worlds.
The relative and the
Those
absolute.
two
Yeah,
things.
yeah. This unconditioned reality and this very necessary discriminative way of experiencing the world. I mean, we really need to say, because it can get a bad press, duality and discrimination, but it's a very useful thing. I mean, we absolutely need to discriminate. And, otherwise we take the wrong bus or catch the wrong train or cross the road when there was a vehicle coming. We need to discriminate. It's useful. So line 4, which is a lovely line, he says, "The children meet with shouts and dances."
Sounds quite joyful.
Sounds joyful, yeah? Yeah. The children meet with shouts and dances. So who are these children and why are they shouting and dancing?
It's us, we're alive.
It's us in our lives, yeah. If we can feel liberated.
So, to lasting in delusion.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. It's playing in that place of separation and union. It's being able to play with it, and feel joyful in it, and shout and sing and dance in it. And these aren't my words, but I think it sums it up wonderfully well. It's Tagore's image of the infinity of reality. The infinity of reality. And there's another paradox, the infinity of reality, because reality feels like it's limited. And it's described as the infinity of reality. So I suppose the final message that comes out of this, if we can kind of embrace it and hold on to it, is that because the relative reality of our everyday worlds is finally empty, then this relative reality, which is finally empty, is in fact nirvana. That strange word that we use. When we say samsara is nirvana and nirvana is samsara, that's what we're saying. I mean, where else can it be? It's not up in the mountains in Tibet or some remote corner of China. This nirvana, this samsara is nirvana, nirvana is samsara. Where else is it? Yeah, and the Buddha said that the reason we can't see that is that we have an upside down view. Our upside down view is that we think that separation is reality and that separation causes suffering, and so the whole thing rolls. And so should I move on from that? Has everybody got that verse? And it is a sweet verse, isn't it? I mean, it says it all finally. And in fact, interestingly, it reflects the life of the Buddha, because the Buddha's search for release from suffering first of all took him to he used all the psychological techniques and methods of his time, and one of them was really losing yourself in this idea of the infinity. I wasn't there at the time, and I don't really know for sure that was the case, but the culture of that time, there was this idea of losing yourself in the infinity, and he succeeded in doing that, and he still didn't scratch the itch. It still didn't work. He still didn't feel settled, and his next path was to really forcibly, if you like, almost force himself into a space of liberation and release by all kinds of ascetic practices, diet and exercise and no sleep and all kinds of things. And again, that didn't settle him. So he did both. He first of all he tried to go for the infinity of the sky, and then he went forcibly into the reality of wanting to suppress this small sense of self forcibly, to kill the ego, and neither worked for him. So I have to leave my glasses on to see you and take them off to read.
Is that the absolute and relative?
Pardon?
Is that
It's the absolute reality, yeah. So it was only after rejecting both that paradoxically he found peace. And the peace didn't come from escaping ordinary life. It came from seeing it from a different perspective. So, this is somebody else's quote. The Buddha's insight was a balancing act. It required acceptance of things just as they are, while seeing through the instinctual tendencies to make them more or less than they could be. So peace arose not through dissolving or letting go of the reality of his everyday ordinary self, but of dissolving greed, anger and hatred, which were the three poisons. So it all always comes back to what I talked about in the very beginning, that Sesshin gives us the opportunity to practice, and Zazen really kind of pins us into it, is being present to your life in this moment. And if there was another way to do it, let me know. 'Cause, yeah. So this unification, if you like, of the paradox of form and emptiness of this small everyday self and this bigger, infinite, unborn, undying self, as I understand it, is called the Great Embrace. So can you allow yourselves to be embraced in the Great Embrace? Can you simultaneously embrace the infinite sky and the restless sea of all the stuff that comes up for you on a daily basis? And finally, can you be like that child on the seashore that's shouting and dancing? What do you think? Are you good enough? Are you bad enough?
I was going to say, David, that I think that's one of the attractions of the seaside. Everybody likes to go to the seaside.
Yeah, it's true, Joe. It is. There is that feel in the seaside, isn't it? You can find and feel relaxed and play, and all the elements are going as well.
You kind of feel between the two things.
It's
almost exactly as
it is. It's a nice metaphor, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah. Oh. Okay, so I just want to, a couple of things I haven't finished yet. So, any questions on that, by the way, or comments, or?
Just thinking, as Joe's saying, being here at Crosby, often after a few days on retreat, and you walk down to the seashore there, particularly when it's sunny and the kids are on holiday, and it does give you a sort of different fix on it. But one other thing about the image is the kids shouting and playing against an infinite sky. A perspective might be that they're sort of insignificant specks against this universal absolute.
Yeah.
And if they step into that raging sea, they would drown as well.
Yeah.
So the reality of their humanity is definitely there.
It's present, yeah.
But they're absolutely
They're still joyful, yeah.
still joyful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because I was thinking the other day, you know that a few years ago they talked about, what was it, if a butterfly flaps its wings in South America, the price of tea goes down in China or something, you know, I can't remember what it was. But, you know, when we think about our own lives, if you think about the flutter of a butterfly's wings, if that has an effect, then each of our lives definitely must have an effect, a significant effect. So each of our lives is valid, is uniquely valid. I think it's really worth remembering that.
I think that also for me ties in what you said earlier about dealing with your conditioned responses, and the danger, well for me personally, the danger is thinking that you've cracked that.
Yeah.
And I don't think you ever have. I think you just got to keep on, carry on and carry on and carry on.
Yeah.
And by just staying in the practice and sitting, that gives you the ability to see, well, no, I haven't cracked that, but I'm aware of it.
I'm aware of it, yeah. Yeah. I completely agree with you, Keith, that, you know, we can all think we cracked something, and some emotion or conditioned response or attitude or view, and then blow me down. Something will come along, maybe a human being will really, you know, press one of our buttons, and we realise, no, we haven't finished, we've still got practice, we've still got to carry on. Yeah. And, you know, some people can be kind of depressed by that. I find it inspirational. I think it's fantastic that, you know, for however many years I've got left, and for how many years you've got left, you've got a fantastic project in hand. Yeah, you've always got something to do. There's always going to be stuff coming up. There's always going to be issues. And each one of them is an opportunity to, you know, even out of curiosity, to think, how am I going to handle that this time? You know, so it can be wonderful in a way. You know, none of us need to worry that we're not going to have anything to do.
Seems as if we've made this huge echo chamber for ourselves now with media. Not long ago, we only ever met a couple of hundred people in our lives. And we only had to impact their lives to feel that our life had meaning.
Yeah.
Now with this huge echo chamber, we can be easily a bit deluded that unless we've changed the whole world or gained some nefarious celebrity that had any meaning. And it's very important to remember that each life is of value.
Say again.
It's so important to remember for us that our lives are just as meaningful as value.
For sure, yeah.
We're not seduced by this enormous megaphone.
I was just thinking how much gratitude we could have for this moment and this life, and I feel sometimes how grateful I am that Maizumi Roshi made the trip from Japan to America. You see, and then from that journey that he made and what happened there, then somebody like Tenshin made a journey from England to America, and then he comes back here. So everything touches on everything else, and all of this exists right now because of that action when Maizumi Roshi left Japan on a boat.
Yeah. And his mum and dad had sex. That's really important.
They had
It goes all the way back to some slime somewhere in the far distant past that decided it wanted to have consciousness. And then there was a fish that decided it wanted to go on land. And here we all are. What a strange business, eh? So, sorry, have you done?
Yeah.
Okay.
That gave me something else to think.
I know. You can keep going, can't it? And thanks to your mum and dad as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, mum and dad.
when you get ordained, you bow to your parents.
You
Whether
do,
you're
you
alive
do,
or dead,
you do.
but still, the only reason your life is existing is because they existed. Perhaps.
Perhaps. Who knows what the bigger picture is? So, one question that often arises and I think I've written about this on the website, but I just wanted to bring it up again because it always comes up on Sesshin. You know, we come on Sesshin and we maybe have some understandings or realizations or some clarity, or in fact, you know, maybe not now. We're not perhaps grateful we're here, but toward the end of the week, most of us are glad we've done Sesshin. And how do we take that into our lives? You know, how do we take practice into our lives? And I really want to flip that, you know. For most of us, that is the wrong way to look at it from my perspective. How do we bring our daily life into practice is more important to me. How do we make our daily life practice? Because most of us, that's what we're doing most of the time. You know, we're in work or with family or just all the things that go on. We're driving along on the road and somebody's winding us up and, you know, we're fed up. And how do we bring that into our practice? I think that's a really good challenge for you to think about. Because then the whole practice becomes about our whole life. So, you know, how do we cultivate goodwill toward other folk and to ourselves and develop a more panoramic, spacious view of life? And that, for me, all of this contributes to remaining sane and to having faith. And I'm kind of reluctant to use this word because it has a lot of overtones, but the sacredness of each moment. Because when the moments are running out, they do feel sacred. So not only is practice intrinsic to my life, but my life's intrinsic to practice. And although sometimes, I think like all of us, I think, oh, it would be nice to escape this, have a breather, have a rest from it. The reality is that this is a kind of, you know, it's an empty dream. This is your life. This is the only life you've got. And according to Brian Cox the other night, it looks like, you know, his view is that the consciousness only exists on this planet. So in those billions and billions of, not only of stars, as I understand, but there are even billions of galaxies, we have the opportunity to be alive and conscious. So it would be churlish not to make the best of it. Although, you know, on a bad day you could ask me again. And then one final thing which I wanted to just kind of clarify for myself and for you, because it often comes up, is, and it's about pretty much what we've been talking about today, is, and I want to read it to you because this is not me, but I read this and I really liked it. And it's about when Dogen talks about thinking non-thinking, and we think, how can we think non-thinking? This is a bit wordy, so forgive whoever wrote it, but I think it's good. Non-thinking is thus, as I understand it, the cognitive articulation of suchness, as in, for example, the insight that everything is basically okay. Everything is okay. All things shall be well. This is non-thinking. Thinking is the duality where there are both things which are and are not. Non-thinking only comes forth when thinking is suspended by not thinking. The thinking duality is nonetheless essentially simple, and it's needed to distinguish one thing from another. The tragedy of the human condition is typically how this duality is corrupted into the fear-driven dualism of a lifestyle, which causes suffering. But non-thinking, or this person is saying, thinking about non-thinking is not, there's nothing arising or coming up for you. It's non-thinking is thinking in a way which doesn't have an either or to it, isn't good or bad, right or wrong. We're just present to the moment, present to what's coming up. We're not categorizing it as what I want or what I don't want, or right or wrong. It's just being present to what's coming up without judgment. That makes sense to me. I mean, Roshi may clarify that tomorrow, and he may have a different view of it. But my conclusion is that non-thinking is thinking without being caught in the good and badness of things. There may be a place that you've experienced where nothing arises, but I think mainly when people experience that place, they're brain dead. There may be another place, that I haven't achieved yet, but so non-thinking is thinking without thinking dualistically. And that's an interesting point that Ken Jones makes about dualistic thinking and duality. Dualistic thinking is thinking about, dualistic is thinking, in opposites, polarized things, good, bad, right, wrong, high, low. Duality is a necessary thing. Duality is required in order for us to operate and to function. There's nothing wrong with it. Yeah. So it's an interesting separation that Ken's made. Okay, I'm done. Has anybody got anything they'd like to add, or does anybody ever watch Jules Holland? Later with Jules Holland? Mm-hmm. He usually has about 2 or 3 minutes before the end when he hasn't got anything to say. And he fills the time by saying, I haven't got anything to say. We've got 5 minutes and I haven't got anything to say. I don't know whether you have anything 5 minutes worth to say, or we can just finish.
Sensei, if anybody has got anything to say, it might be a bit late, but we're going to use the microphone.
I didn't realise we had the mic, but I've been able to hear folk today.
Yeah, it's more or less for the recording.
Yeah, for the recording.
So we can hear what people are saying.
Okay. Well, we've only got 5 minutes, so let's forget the mic. Yeah.
Use it tomorrow.
That's good. Then I'll talk.
Oh, wouldn't you talk with that mic?
No, you'd hear an American accent anyway. So I have a question. Between inhalation and exhalation, there's actually a space. And between exhalation and inhalation, there's a space before you take your next breath, or the next breath is taken. So perhaps there's the possibility that between thinking and non-thinking, there is a space where neither thinking nor non-thinking takes place.
Okay.
And
what does that look like?
It looks like nothing.
Okay.
And it's like when you're sitting, sometimes you feel pain in your knees, or a lot of times. Then you get up and you walk, and there's no pain in your knees. I mean, the pain has gone away. So where did it go? That pain that was there.
It's gone to pain heaven, I think.
I'm just.
Sorry, I'm teasing you.
Yeah, that's
I'm
good.
teasing you. It's okay.
I'm fine.
Where's it gone? I give in. I wish I knew, because then I could send it there with a kick up the bottom. Fast.
But isn't that surprising?
Yeah, I think it is surprising, and people do talk about that gap between the in-breath and the out-breath. But I don't know it myself. All I know, as soon as I become conscious of my breath, if I become at all conscious of my breath, I start going. So I try not to think about it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's something I've noticed. You know, when most of us in sitting, we focus on the breath. I mean, I know there are other methods, aren't there?
Yeah.
And as soon as I watch my breath, I interfere with it, and I've never managed to just watch it without interfering with it. And I think there's a similar there with the mind and how it interferes with things.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, you know, it can be dualistic. Yeah.
Start watching my breath. It doesn't. As you just said, I start breathing in a different way, and I haven't. I think that's perhaps something I would like to be able to watch it without interfering with it, and then maybe that would generalise, and I'd be able to. That would generalise. That benefit would generalise to other things.
My suggestion would be just to let it go. Let the counting go. Just let whatever comes up come up. Yeah. Yeah. You can go free form, like in jazz, you know, and then just let it all go. And it will happen.
Maybe
It's a
focus
bit
on
like the social psychology discovery, that the Hawthorne effect, that an experiment is never objective, but the observer.
Sure.
affects.
We interfere all the time, yeah. 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 Okay. Thank you. Thanks everybody. Thank you.